Hey, all, it's KR, King of D&D Homebrew, talking today about how to keep your players motivated, engaged in your world, where they feel like they've got lots of things to do that they can do because you're creating a sandbox homebrew. You're letting them go where they want without railroading, without resorting to the ticking clock situation, which, by the way, I'm a little bit prone to, as my players know. But, the thing about those that if you don't do this by a certain time, the world's going to be destroyed. I don't do those. But you know what I'm saying, where you're sort of forcing them with this time frame. Can you create a world in which the players are engaged, they feel like they have things to do, they don't feel like there's a dead end? And I do think there's a number of strategies that you can employ so that your players always feel like they're in control of what they want to do. There's multiple options and they can decide how they want to do them. And they're aware of the relationships between them. So obviously the first thing is pretty obvious: have multiple story hooks. Have a number of things when the players first, let's say they're going to start at first level in your world, create, it could be 3, it could be 5, however ambitious you are, possible storylines the players can follow, and then you introduce them. They can be through the players' backgrounds. They're all going to meet each other depending on their relationship at the beginning of your campaign. Do several or all of the players know each other? Are they just meeting as strangers? Do they have what I usually use? They have a common NPC that they all know. Mine is always Zodi the Tavern Keep, but you can do whatever you want. And when they come together at the classic tavern or wherever, they have options that they're aware of. And how you do this when you introduce those is, you could have events, rumors of there's something going on in the forest to the east people are hearing about, or there was a pirate raid on one of the merchant ships, and the people hear that the Royal Navy is, very concerned about this, but this ship disappeared or something, or, and then you have sailors in the tavern that talk about a mysterious fog which rose up and seemed to swallow the ship, right? And then the pirates come out, whatever it is, these stories, because again, and a lot of it might be exaggerations and rumors and whatnot. But you've got a bunch of these that they're not super secret. They're sort of common knowledge of activities that are going on in the vicinity of where the starting location of your world is. So as I say, start with 3 to 5, however, and again, these can be pretty vague because the players are going to go for one. You don't want to railroad and make them, you got to go for the pirate thing, or you got to go for the incident in the forest, some village attack. Let them decide what they want to do and have it enough just so that they can start off. If they're first level, maybe they have some initial battle, maybe random monsters or prepared monster. Maybe they do some negotiations. They get to this village that they're going to protect, and they have to do some role play there with the villagers, and they find out more information, and they go somewhere. And then the next session, you're going to develop that in detail if you haven't already. Again, I would tend to make the first 3 to 5 that I come up with pretty detailed, right? But you're going to develop that when they go in that direction that they chose. And then the next thing you want to think about is the recap and reflection after the end of a session, or usually I do this at the beginning of a session where the players discuss what happened in the last session. And, I know some people will give people experience. Some people will give them, like in the Pathfinder system I played online, where they give you a hero point if you're the one to do the recap. That's fine, but you just, what I find is, especially if I'm playing like every other week or something, you need to do that. And you need to have a recap handy for this, because suppose the players come together and you say, okay, so-and-so recap the last session. And they're like, I know we went into these forests, and what was that? Was that this camping? Right there, they're struggling. Okay, whoever. And suddenly you realize, okay, maybe they get 75% of the last session, but they're missing something. Now, one of the ways you could do this, you could just give them the information as they're struggling with the guy. Who was the guy in the forest that ran the town? Oh, and you give them the name. Oh, that's right. Or you prod them. What you're trying to do here, again, is to recap and keep them engaged as though that session just ended. Not a week or 2 weeks ago, but, yesterday or something. It's fresh in their minds, just like it would be, right? If you end the game, they're resting at some place, but it's all just happened. You want to have that feeling in your game to keep the engagement going. But another technique you can have, if they've completely forgotten something, is to have an NPC recap, right? If you've got wherever they are, you remind them they're in this village, and the village elder comes to them and says, I just want to make sure, I've got some information for you, or there's an old woman at the edge of the thing who may have seen something, and then recaps what happened. Because that recap is really important to maintain engagement. Nobody is sitting there in their chair, because this can happen. Players that are, they're just not the type to ask, or they tend to be a little bit on their phone or something like that, or looking at their character sheet if they're on their phone. Let's say they got Path Builder, and they're not quite sure what's going on. You have an NPC remind everyone what's going on, what's vital. So one way or the other, you're going to recap this session every time. You're going to go over that, and you're going to do it in a way that allows the players to be engaged in the moment that they left off. They're right there and they're ready to go. And this ties into another thing. As the players move along, let's say they're third or fourth level, again, depending on what your system is and how that works. But now you've got maybe 5, 10 different things. Probably not. Usually the players are trying to do this and that. But whatever, they've moved on from some, and you want to reintroduce them. You want to remind the players that this stuff is out there. And you can do this through NPCs, right, who come along and talk about those pirates. Boy, now the trade is completely cut off and everybody has to sail all the way around this other route because of this pirate activity's gotten worse, right? Or that village out, refugees come into the city. The village was destroyed by an incursion of, gnolls or trolls or whatever it is, right? Things are happening and they're reminded of that. And it doesn't have to be like that, because that makes it, yes, things do go on. Things do happen if the players ignore a plot hook. It doesn't have to be a disaster or anything. One of my favorites to remind the players is a group of NPCs comes in, all, buying drinks on the house because they explored something the players ignored and made a big score. Now, you don't want to do that too much. But that's the old dynamic world aspect, where if you ignore something, that doesn't mean other adventurers won't go for it, because they hear about it too. Now, what can happen is the players can be like, oh my God, we want to do this, we want to do that. What's the most lucrative? We don't want these, to lose this, but then we've got that. But in fact, that can be a very good thing. Too much to do, too many things. But what happens when you've got too many, as I say, they can slip through the cracks. People forget them even during the recap. And you forget it too, because it's, 5 sessions in the past. So you want to look over your notes and say, are there any things going on here that I need to reintroduce to the players? And NPCs who are connected to that are the logical choice. Another thing that you can do is, as the players move up in level, now that they're entrenched in the world and they have renown. And so it's sensible that NPCs and people would come to them with problems or requests for help, or just they'd be on the inside a little more. Now they're part of the council, for the town, or, they're negotiating things. This is what usually happens with my players. They start negotiating between cities as they rise up. And it just gives them an opportunity to hear about things all the time. Hear about at a grand scale. You're going to be on the inside of information, and information leads to story hooks in a RPG setting. So we're doing the recap, right? We're having NPCs remind players of things they may have forgotten about, and it makes sense for them. They have responsibilities. Let's say they are part of the power structure. They're going to hear about things. And they're going to start to get a sense of the forward momentum of your world. They started at level 1 and they're going along and they're seeing things evolve. They're driving a lot of this by their choices, but some of it's happening on its own. It's a dynamic world, and they're getting opportunities to take part in those things. And that's going to spur them on. That's going to, when they think, I can change the world, I can make this happen in my way, they stay engaged. But that means you have to think about, how do I let them know what's going on? And that means they have to become aware of these events somehow, without, as I always talk about, without railroading, that's why the ticking time bomb, the ticking clock deal, it can be problematic because it just railroads them over here. But you want the dynamic world. If they ignore this and ignore this and ignore this, and it's just too lucrative or it's too dangerous or whatever, that's going to cause potentially a ticking clock, right? If you ignore a problem long enough, it can grow into a real problem. You know, that's the way the real world works, and it can in an RPG setting, and that can be fun. You know, when I talked about trying to avoid the ticking clock, another thing that you probably want to avoid is having things like prophetic dreams come to the players, or, you know, some kind of divine intervention, because it always feels a little railroady. It always feels like, oh, the GM put this in my dream, I better do it. Or, oh, I got a vision from my God if you have a cleric, now I got to go do this. And, you know, I just think I always want the players to decide, they decide this is what we want to do. And it just might be motivated purely by greed, but that's okay, right? You don't want to ever, you're always thinking, I don't want to force them. You know, they may do stuff that causes NPCs, sentient creatures, whatever, to gain a super upper hand in the world, and their goal is to, say, dominate the world. The players gave these artifacts to these mind flayers, this elder brain. You know it's going to use them to increase their power. So that becomes sort of a ticking clock, or, you know, something that this has to be attended to right now. But the players did that. The players caused a situation to evolve, and again, ignoring the mind flayers. It looks like they've taken that artifact. Well, we don't have time for that because we want to go set up this, you know, shipping route. Okay. Just telling you, you know, and you can have NPCs or whatever warn the players about that, or just evidence that the mind flayers are spreading their influence or whatever, right? This dynamic world. But you don't necessarily want, in a dream, you see that mind flayers have gained control of some artifact and you need to go there right now to stop it. That's not the way to increase engagement, because it's railroading. If one of the players' mothers is kidnapped by a bad guy, and he's threatening to kill her, that's kind of railroady, right? That's kind of like, and maybe the player would say, well, it's an imaginary mother. I don't care. I want to go on this shipping thing. That's what we're going to do, right? But they're going to feel like you as the GM are saying, you need to do that. And why? Why is that so important? Let the importance of things evolve out of the player's activities. Because that's the way, ultimately, they're going to be engaged. They're presented with these plot hooks. They keep track of what's going on. They go to where their interests, whatever those interests are. They're reminded of these things, and these things build on other things. And the players are constantly deciding which way they're going to go. And, you know, I don't like the whole there's a big bad villain at the end of a campaign thing. That's not the way I play. You know, so with me, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm waiting for the players to do that, so I'm watching it as well. But my responsibility, I do have to keep track of it, right? Because after I've developed those first, 3 or 4 plot hooks, I'm developing others as I go along based on what the players are interested in. And so then I'm merging them together. So I have to know how this all works together too. That keeps me engaged, keeps me on my toes, and keeps giving me ideas that makes my world immersive and interconnected and interesting for the players. And a shout out to my Patreon supporters. Love you guys. I just did this whole cursed Oasis thing, which was really fun. Going to do a map of that this week. If you like what you've seen, please like it, comment. I'd love to hear how techniques you use to keep your players engaged. Most importantly, my friends, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.